everybody, it's Sarah, and I can already guarantee you that today is going to be a long video because we're gonna talk about the books that I read in August of 2021, and it tallied up to be a total of 23 books. So yeah, quite a few books, just a few, you know. But before we get into talking about the books, let me first mention the books that I won't talk about. And those are these here. The reason why I won't talk about them is because I already shared my thoughts on them in my recent reads video, my mid-month check-in. And so if you're interested in knowing my thoughts on these particular books, go and check out that video, which will be linked down below and up there as well. And the books are A Lover's Discourse, The Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty, which is the third book in the Daevabad trilogy, Moby Dick by Herman Melville, The Rogue by Trudy Canavan, which is the second book in the Traitor Spy trilogy, At Night All Blood is Black by David Diop, then Dragon Rider by Cornelia Funke, and volume 1 of my collected copy of Arabian Nights. So these books, as I said, I won't talk about in this video. Go and check out the video link down below if you're interested in my thoughts. And now let's get into the, I don't know how many books, like 70 books that are left over here in stacks, which, yeah, let's get into it. So as always, let's start with rereads. First, I have The Bands of Mourning by Brandon Sanderson, which is the third book in the Wex and Wayne Quartet, which is the second series set within Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn world. And this is also part of Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere. That's also the reason why I reread this, because I'm doing an entire Cosmere reread this year. I joined the Crab-along, which is a year-long Cosmere read-along. August was the month for The Bands of Mourning, and so far I don't know if it's a success or not, because especially with the Mistborn books, something I have noticed a lot is that I don't enjoy them as much as I remembered enjoying them, and it's a bit of a disappointment. But yeah, for those of you who do not know, I won't specifically tell you what this series is about, because this is the second series set within the same world. But basically both of the Mistborn series are set within a world where you have some people who can swallow metals, and then from swallowing those metals get specific powers. And within the first series we follow Vin, who is a street urchin, and she joins a crew of thieves and criminals who decided they wanna rob the Lord Ruler, who basically has been the tyrant of this world for the past millennium or so. And the second series is then set a few centuries after the first series, and we have more of a flintlock fantasy setting, so Industrial Revolution, Wild West, those types of vibes. But yeah, specifically what I can say about this book, about The Bands of Mourning, is I still love Steris. I still love Steris so much. I think she is such a unique character within fantasy. Also, it's so rare that we get a female character who is on the spectrum, or who is coded to be on the spectrum, which Brandon Sanderson has confirmed. So I just love that so much. But on the other side, there were some things that I hated a lot that for some reason I didn't notice the first time I read this. And that is mostly that, I don't know, some parts of this book feel like they're pushing a religious Christian agenda. And I can't talk too much about it without going into spoilers, but there's a conversation between two characters that just, it felt very Christian. It felt very sermon-y. I didn't like it. I did not like it whatsoever. Then the other reread I'm gonna talk about in this video is actually an entire series, and that is because I spontaneously decided to reread The Others series by Anne Bishop, which is a total of 7 books. There's 4 books in the series that are the main storyline, and then there's 3 companion novels. 1 with the same characters as the original 4, and then 2 more set in different parts of the same world. I will set this down now and yeah, just hold up the first book to talk about it. The first book, by the way, is Written in Red, And in this one we follow Meg Corbin. This is set within a world that is very similar to our own, but basically there's like werewolves and vampires and elementals and so on. And in the first book we follow Meg Corbin, who is on the run. And the reason why she is on the run we find out in the course of the story, but what she is she is a blood prophet, which basically means if she cuts herself deep enough, or also just, you know, if she's hurt and she bleeds, then she sees prophecies. And that is also part of the reason why she's on the run. Now she ends up in a courtyard, which basically is the home of werewolves, vampires, and so on. And her arriving there sets a lot of things in motion. I just absolutely love this series so much. I think it has one of the best done slow burn romances ever, because there's so much attention paid to who the characters are and what the characters need, and to the characters just growing closer to each other and just turning into what the other person needs in a way. I don't know how else to explain it. I love all these side characters so much. I love all the dynamics so much. I mean, I have to admit that if you've read one of Anne Bishop's books, you kind of have read all of the books in terms of the character dynamics, because she uses the same character dynamics over and over again. But since those are character dynamics that I just eat up and that I love so much, I don't even care whatsoever. And yeah, it was just a delight rereading this series, and I can just highly recommend it to anyone. I mean, the thing that I do have to criticize about these books, where my nostalgia glasses help a lot, is that these books are very straight. Like, queerness isn't really a thing within Anne Bishop's novels, or if it is a thing, it's just like, you know, very much in the background. Moving on to books that weren't rereads. First I have Faust's Leben, Taten und Höllenfahrt by Friedrich Klinger. This is a German classic. Friedrich Klinger also, funnily enough, is the dude who wrote a play that an entire epoch or era within German literature was named after, which is Sturm und Drang. I don't know if people within non-German countries learn about that in literature as well. But yeah, this is basically an iteration of the Faust story. For those of you who don't know, the Faust story is about a man called Faust, Dr. Faustus, Johann Faustus, who makes a deal with the devil. What this deal entails is always a little bit different, but mostly it centers either experiences or experiencing different things, knowledge, those types of things. And he makes a deal with the devil for his soul. And within Klinger's Faust specifically, the deal is to know the nature of humankind. And I'm just gonna spoil it because it's fun to read either way. But basically the devil, who in this specific case is Leviathan, shows Faustus the nature of humankind and tries to depress Faust with showing him the nature of humankind, because humans are so horrible. So yeah, it's dramatic, it's fun, it's a good read. It's like very different because it's one of the first German novels, but it's not written in a way that I'd usually connect to novels. Like, especially the dialogue within this book is very much written like a play almost, without a lot of descriptions of, you know, surroundings, or X said something, or X, I don't know, shouted something along those lines. But yeah, can recommend it if you're into Faust stories. Next I have Geistergeschichten aus Japan by Lafcadio Hearn and illustrated by Benjamin Lacombe. This translates to Ghost Stories from Japan, and it's exactly that. It's a collection of Japanese ghost stories that is just beautifully illustrated. I hope this is in focus, but yeah, there's just so many absolutely gorgeous illustrations in here, and I very much enjoyed that. I almost enjoyed the illustrations more than I enjoyed the stories. But yeah, can highly recommend picking this up. It's definitely worth it, especially for the illustrations. A random book I picked up at the bookstore is After Love by Tanya Byrne. I don't know how to pronounce that last name, which is a YA supernatural romance. I just saw this at my bookstore and I was like, you know what, I'm kind of feeling like reading romance lately, but also kind of not, because typically I don't enjoy romances that much. But sometimes I'm like in the feel, if it's like exactly hits that spot that a lot of fan fiction hits, then I really enjoy romance. Like, I don't need realistic or whatever, I just need pure fluff. And this specific one, I mean, I don't really know how to summarize this. I could summarize it the way the back summarizes it, but the thing is, the back spoils something that happens only about halfway through the story, so, you know, I'm just confused. But let's just summarize it the way the back is summarized. This is a sapphic romance and we follow Ash, who falls in love with Poppy. However, Ash dies on New Year's Eve and she's the last person to die, which means she is turned into a Reaper. And Ash then decides that she still wants to spend time with Poppy even though she's dead and Poppy is alive, and she wants to find a way to still spend time together. So yeah, that's what this book is. It was fun. It wasn't particularly memorable. It's whatever. You know, I picked it up. I'm happy I picked it up. I think if this is the type of story you enjoy, then you will really enjoy this. But otherwise, it's just whatever. And the next book I'm gonna talk about is Trudy Canavan's The Traitor Queen, which is the third book in the Traitor Spy trilogy. And the Traitor Spy trilogy is the sequel trilogy to Trudy Canavan's Black Magicians trilogy. Because of that, I also won't tell you too much of what this is about. Basically, we're following some same characters, some new characters, some children of characters from the first series. It's kind of a continuation, kind of not. Like, some plot lines are indirect continuations from plot lines in the first series, and some other plot lines are completely new ones. However, I won't talk too much on my thoughts on this because I do want to do a whole series review of this as well. But generally speaking, I was mostly happy with how this series ended. I mean, there's some issues I have with the series. There's some issues in terms of tropes used within the series that already were there in the original trilogy, but in the original trilogy they weren't as prevalent as within this series because we changed some locations in this series. But yeah, tropes mostly to do with Orientalism and fantasy, I'm just gonna say it like that. But yeah, not a favorite series of mine. There were some nostalgic moments, there were some things that I highly enjoyed in this series, but overall I think the series is like a solid 3-star series. Another book I won't talk about too long is She Who Became the Sun. Actually, I won't talk too long about any of the books that I'm still gonna talk about. But first, She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. With this one, I have now finished the sapphic fantasy trifecta of 2021. And sadly, I have to say that mostly this is the book that I enjoyed the least. Now, first, let's talk about what this is about. This is marketed as Mulan meets The Song of Achilles, although I have to be honest, I'm just really not happy with that marketing sentence. I mean, what's the surprise? It's Mulan in the way where it's set in historical China. This is, did I say it's high fantasy? It's historical fantasy. So this is set within ancient China, and we follow a character who was born as a girl but who takes over the identity of her brother. In terms of the gender swapping, gender bending thing, I guess you could say it's a Mulan thing, also because it's set within China, but that's really all this book has in common with Mulan. And in terms of The Song of Achilles, what it has in common with that is that we follow a character whose goal is to become great and to become well known. And my battery is already flashing again because I didn't have my battery loaded, so I'm just gonna switch out the batteries over and over again until we're done with this video, and while I talk for 10 minutes the other battery can load and so on. But first let me quickly try and get my thoughts on this book in. But yeah, aside from this one character who we follow who wants to become great, there's another character who's kind of their antagonist, who is a general, a very well-known general who is also a eunuch. And so yeah, we follow the two characters as their fates start to intertwine. Now for me, mostly what I'm gonna say right now is that I enjoyed this book. I think I wanna reread it in 1 year, but I also this book couldn't really grab my attention, and I had a very strong feeling of being let down because it just did not whatsoever fit my expectations that I had of this story. And I'm gonna go further into what I mean by that in my review. However, for now, let me just say that I think this is an absolutely great book, but my reading experience of this book very much was not great. So that's just the basic gist of it. So I somehow, not on purpose, kept to 2 5-star books that I had this month for the last 2 books that I want to talk about. And first I have The Black Coast by Mike Brooks, which is the first book in the God King Chronicles, and oh my god, this book was so good. It was so amazing. It was so amazing to the point that it's one of those books that I want to make a review about because I just want to gush about it for ages. But first, once again, what is this book about? In this world, we kind of follow multiple different POVs that are set in different places. However, all of the main POVs, the POVs that we spend the most time with, are set in the same surroundings, which is kind of this little village at the coast of this country. And this village has an experience every few years. There's raiders coming, killing people, raiding things, as you do. And so, you know, that's kind of the hardships those village has to deal with. Now, one day, there's once again raiders coming over the sea from the horizon. However, those raiders do not come to raid, but they come to settle. And so, you know, there's a truce being set, not being set, I don't know the verb right now. There's a truce being truced between the village and the raiders, and the raiders are allowed to settle because they are fleeing from something. And we find out in the course of this book what the something is that they're fleeing from. Now, the reason why I mostly absolutely love this book is because, first of all, I loved most of the characters, and the second reason is the queer world building. It once again got me with the queer world building. It's just so well done. Like, all of the different cultures within this world have certain aspects of queerness, but are then extremely bigoted, or slightly bigoted even just sometimes, towards other aspects of queerness. And it just makes the interactions, the cultural interactions, so incredibly interesting. Also, there's this one culture where in terms of gender, the world building done is so great. I absolutely love it. Then it's just so nice because you can't really love or hate any of the cultures, because all of the cultures have an aspect where they're extremely bigoted and extremely, you know, conservative, or for our views conservative, but then they have another aspect where for our views they're extremely progressive. And I just love that world building so much. But as I said, I will have a whole gush review of this. Probably will wait until I read book 2, which is The Splintered King, which comes out in September already, so I'm very excited for that. And yeah, I can't wait to see where this series goes. And then the last book I want to talk about, the last 5-star read for this wrap up, is The Chosen and the Beautiful by Nhi Vo, which it looks like I tapped this up a lot, but actually I didn't, because this book belongs to a friend of mine who lent it to me, which I kind of now regret, because I do really want a copy of my own of this book, because Nhi Vo's writing is so gorgeous, so beautiful. It's so good. But first, let me talk about once again what this is about. This is a queer BIPOC retelling of The Great Gatsby, and we follow Jordan, who in The Great Gatsby in the original is Nick Carraway's girlfriend, or, you know, liaison thing, affair, whatever you want to call it. I have never read The Great Gatsby, by the way, and I don't think it's necessary whatsoever to read this. And once again, I do not want to take away too much of what I'm gonna talk about in my review. Actually, not my review, I'll review this together, or I'll make a video together with the friend who lent this to me, who, I mean, every time they lend me a book, I just regret having borrowed it from them, because I just want a copy of my own of it. The other book that they lent me last year was Ocean Vuong's On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, which, you know, was another gorgeous book. But yeah, just very quickly, once again, the things that I just absolutely loved about this was the way the characters were built, the way the story was structured, the way the story was told. Hannah just came in. Where was I? Yeah, the last thing that I absolutely loved about this book was the writing, which Nevo has a way with words that's, I mean, head off. Can you say it like that in English as well? In German I would say Hut ab, but oh my god, I can highly recommend anyone go read this book if you've read The Great Gatsby, or if you haven't read The Great Gatsby. And that was all the books that I read in August, and this was a very long wrap up. My camera is once again blinking, the battery is blinking, so let's go through the outro spiel just very quickly. If you have any thoughts on any of the books that I talked about in this video, leave it in the comments, leave them in the comments down below. If you have any thoughts on any of the books that I talked about just now, leave them in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media, as well as to my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, where I read one adult high fantasy book written by a woman or genderqueer person per month, will be left in the description box down below as well. So if you're interested in joining, check those links out. In September, we're reading The Midnight Bargain by C.L. Polk. Also, as I said, if you're interested in my thoughts of the books that I read in the first half of August, that video is linked down below. And with all of that said, I hope I'll see you very soon. Bye!